It was 2:47 a.m. when I clocked in for my night shift at the gas station. Graveyard shifts like this were supposed to be boring. Just a handful of truckers filling up or teenagers grabbing snacks. But that night was different. Started as soon as I stepped inside. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder than usual, and one in the corner flickered erratically like it was barely holding on. The air smelled stale, almost metallic, and the temperature inside was colder than the winter air outside. I chalked it up to the old HVAC system acting up again and headed behind the counter. Halfway through checking the inventory list, I noticed something strange. The security monitors, which were supposed to cycle through views of the pumps, parking lot, and store aisles, were frozen. Each screen displayed a different part of the store, but the images weren't moving. They were eerily still, like I was looking at photographs. I tapped the monitor, thinking it was a glitch. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. One of the screens, the one showing the aisle with the chips and snacks, had a figure in it. A tall man in a long black coat, his back to the camera, standing perfectly still. But there was no one in the store. I scanned the aisles from behind the counter, my eyes darting to where the man should have been. Nothing. The aisle was empty. I looked back at the monitor. He was still there. Okay, maybe I was just tired. Maybe it was some old footage from before I started my shift. But then he moved. Not much, just a slight tilt of his head, like he was listening for something. I don't know why I didn't leave right then and there. Something about the way he moved, slow and deliberate, felt wrong. Like he wasn't supposed to be there. A sharp ding broke the silence. Someone or something had opened the front door. I froze, staring at the counter's reflection in the glass of the frozen security monitors. In the faint glare, I could see the front door slowly creaking open. But when I turned around, it was shut, locked. The air was suddenly colder. Then I heard it, the sound of heavy boots on the tile floor, moving towards the counter. But there was no one there. Nothing. Just the sound of footsteps, growing louder, coming closer. I bolted from behind the counter, my chest tight with panic. The footsteps followed me, stopping every time I did. They were deliberate, measured, almost mocking. I grabbed my phone, ready to call for help, but there was no signal. The emergency landline behind the counter was dead, too. The dial tone replaced by a faint, distorted whispering. I couldn't make out what it was saying, but it sounded like laughter. Low, guttural laughter, just beneath the static. Then the lights went out. The store plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the faint glow of the freezer doors at the back. I stumbled, my breathing erratic, as the sound of footsteps started again. This time, they weren't alone. A faint scraping sound accompanied them, like something sharp being dragged across the floor. I tried to steady myself, forcing my eyes to adjust to the dark. That's when I saw it. Just a silhouette at first, standing in the glow of the freezers. It was the man from the monitor, his coat swaying slightly as though caught in an invisible breeze. But now I could see his face, or rather, the lack of one. Where there should have been eyes, a nose, a mouth, there was nothing. Just smooth, pale skin that seemed to shimmer under the fluorescent glow. And in his hand, a long, rusted blade. I stumbled back, my shoes squeaking against the tile, and his head snapped toward me. It was impossible. He had no eyes, but I could feel him looking at me. The scraping sound grew louder as he began moving toward me, slow and deliberate, dragging the blade along the floor. I darted into the storage room, slamming the door shut behind me. My hands fumbled for something, anything, to barricade it. I found a metal shelf and shoved it against the door, my heart pounding in my chest. For a moment there was silence. Then came the knocking, soft at first like a polite visitor, then harder, more urgent. The entire door rattled with the force of it, the shelf vibrating as the knocking turned into pounding. And then it stopped. I held my breath, straining to hear any sound. Nothing, just silence, thick and suffocating. I dared to hope he was gone. But then, from the far corner of the room, I heard the faintest whisper. "Why are you hiding?" I spun around, my phone flashlight trembling in my hand. The room was empty, completely empty. until it wasn't. The flashlight flickered, and there he was, standing in the corner, his featureless face inches from mine. I screamed, swinging the phone wildly, and he disappeared, just gone, like a puff of smoke. The pounding on the door resumed, louder than ever. The entire shelf rattled, and I knew it wouldn't hold. Desperate, I ran to the back of the storage room where the emergency exit was. I slammed into the door, shoving it open, and burst out into the freezing night air. I didn't stop running. Not when I reached the road. Not when I saw headlights in the distance. Not until I was in the middle of the street, flagging down the first car I saw. The driver, a trucker, pulled over and let me in, his face pale as he asked me what had happened. Couldn't explain. I just begged him to drive. As we pulled away, I glanced back at the gas station. The lights were back on, the parking lot empty. But in the window just behind the counter, I saw him. The man with no face watching as we drove away. I quit that job the next morning. Never went back. And every time I drive past that station at night, I swear, I can feel him watching me. The trucker who picked me up that night, Carl, was a good guy. Rugged, older, maybe mid-50s, and built like someone who'd spent decades hauling freight. As we sped down the highway, he kept glancing at me out of the corner of his eye, clearly spooked by the way I'd flagged him down, panting and half-mad with terror. "Kid," he said, breaking the silence. "What the hell happened back there? You look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't know where to begin. How could I explain that I'd just been chased by a faceless man with a rusted blade? That there were whispers on dead phones and phantom footsteps? It sounded insane. But the silence was worse than talking, so I tried. "There was something, in the store," I stammered. "I don't know what it was. He had no face, and it just kept coming after me." Carl didn't laugh. He didn't tell me I was crazy. He just gripped the wheel tighter, his knuckles going white. "You're not the first," he muttered. I blinked. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, like he wasn't sure if he should keep talking. "I've been driving this route for years. Seen a lot of strange things on these back roads. That gas station, I've heard stories. People disappearing. Weird lights. Things that don't add up. Most of the locals won't go near it after dark. You're lucky you got out of there." His words made my skin crawl. I sank deeper into the passenger seat, staring out at the darkened road ahead. The trees lining the highway seemed to press in closer, their bare branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the occasional thump of the tires hitting cracks in the road. I thought maybe I could start to relax, let the adrenaline wear off. But then, as we rounded a bend, Carl slammed on the brakes. The truck screeched to a stop, and my body lurched forward against the seatbelt. "What the hell?" I shouted. Carl didn't answer. He was staring straight ahead, his face pale. I followed his gaze and felt my stomach drop. There, in the middle of the road, stood a figure. Tall, with a long black coat that billowed slightly in the wind. Even from this distance, I could tell it was him. The faceless man. He didn't move. Didn't flinch as the truck's headlights washed over him. He just stood there, motionless, blocking the road. "Is that—" Carl started, but his voice trailed off. "Go around him," I yelled. "Just drive. Don't stop." Carl shook his head, his hands gripping the wheel like a lifeline. I can't. He's in the middle of the damn road." But before I could scream at him to move, the man did something that froze my blood. Slowly, almost casually, he lifted his hand. He wasn't holding the blade anymore. Instead, he pointed directly at us. Carl cursed under his breath. Nope, we're getting the hell out of here." He threw the truck into reverse, the engine growling as we backed up. But the faceless man didn't chase us. He didn't need to, because as we reversed, I realized something horrifying. The road behind us was no longer empty. More figures were emerging from the trees. Dozens of them. Maybe more. They all had the same featureless faces, the same black coats. And they were all walking toward us, their movements unnaturally smooth and synchronized. "Jesus Christ," Carl muttered, slamming the gear into drive. "Hold on, kid." The truck roared forward, tires screeching as Carl veered off the road and onto the shoulder, narrowly avoiding the faceless man in the center. The truck's massive wheels crunched over branches and rocks, bouncing violently as we plowed through the forest alongside the highway. The faceless figures didn't follow us into the trees, at least not at first, but I kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see one of them just outside, keeping pace with the truck. Eventually, we burst back onto the highway, far past where the figures had been. The road ahead was empty again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still out there, watching us from the shadows. Carl didn't stop driving until we reached a 24-hour diner about 30 miles away. The place was a fluorescent-lit haven, buzzing with the chatter of truckers and the clatter of dishes. For the first time that night, I felt like I could breathe again. We sat at a booth near the back, both of us too rattled to eat. Carl nursed a cup of coffee, his hands still trembling. "That wasn't normal," he said finally. "I don't know what the hell we saw, but it wasn't normal." I nodded, clutching my own mug like it was a lifeline. "Do you think they'll follow us?" Carl hesitated, his eyes darting to the diner's windows. "I don't know, but I'm not taking this route again. And you, kid? Stay away from that gas station." I didn't need to be told twice. We sat there in uneasy silence for a long time, neither of us willing to leave the safety of the diner. But even surrounded by people, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Because sometimes, when I looked at the other diners, I swore their movements didn't quite match their reflections in the window. And when Carl went to pay the check, I caught a glimpse of something on the back of his neck. A faint, dark mark, almost like a burn, shaped like a handprint. I didn't sleep for days after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, the faceless man, and those others moving in perfect unison. The memory of that black coat, that jagged blade scraping across the floor, was burned into my brain like a bad tattoo. Carl kept his word. He quit the route. I found out later that he retired from trucking altogether, moved to Arizona to be near his daughter. He called me once before he left, told me he'd been waking up with night terrors and seeing shadows in the corners of his room. I didn't have the heart to tell him I was experiencing the same thing. I needed answers. The problem was, I didn't know where to start. What the hell had I seen that night? Who or what were they? And why did they pick me? That's when I remembered something Carl had said during the drive. Asterisk, you're not the first. Asterisk gets stuck in my head like a splinter. If there were others, then maybe they'd seen the same things. Maybe someone knew what was going on. I started digging online, combing through local forums, Reddit threads, and true crime blogs. I searched for anything that mentioned the gas station or the surrounding area. That's when I stumbled onto a post in a local urban legends forum. The thread was called "The Faceless Man of Route 47, and the stories in it chilled me to the bone. There were truckers who claimed to have seen him standing at the edge of the woods, watching as they passed. A woman described how her car broke down near the gas station, and when she walked to find help, she heard whispers following her the entire way. Another man, a former night shift worker like me, claimed he'd seen the faceless man inside the station after closing. He'd quit the next day. The deeper I went, the worse it got. People reported seeing figures in their homes after driving past the gas station at night. Some claimed to have been followed by something that only appeared in reflective surfaces, mirrors, windows, even puddles. And then there were the disappearances, dozens of them dating back years, people vanishing without a trace near Route 47. But the most disturbing post was from a guy named Logan 8. His story felt eerily similar to mine. He described working at a gas station on the same road and encountering a man with no face. Logan 8 wrote that after he quit, he started noticing things. Strange people in the background of his photos, shadows moving in his peripheral vision. And then he posted something that made my stomach drop. They don't stop once they find you. They want something. I don't know what, but they want something. If you see the mark, it's already too late. The mark. My thoughts immediately went to Carl, to that faint handprint I'd seen on the back of his neck at the diner. I ran to the bathroom and twisted to look in the mirror, clawing at my own skin. There it was. A dark, faintly shimmering handprint, right at the base of my neck. I didn't even have time to process it before I heard the sound. A soft, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from my bedroom window. I froze. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. There was no fire escape, no balcony, nothing. Slowly, I crept toward the window, my heart pounding in my chest. The tapping continued, steady and deliberate, like someone was rapping their knuckles against the glass. When I reached the window, I stopped breathing. There, pressed against the glass, was a pale, featureless face. Smooth skin where eyes, a nose, and a mouth should have been. It was the faceless man. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, barely visible in the darkness, were dozens of others. Their heads tilted at unnatural angles, their black coats blending into the shadows. They stood perfectly still, watching, or at least I felt them watching. I staggered back, my legs threatening to give out. The tapping stopped, replaced by a low, hollow voice that seemed to echo inside my skull. "You can't run," it whispered. "You've already been marked." And then the window shattered. Glass exploded inward as the faceless man stepped into my apartment, moving with that same deliberate, almost robotic precision. The others followed, pouring into the room like a flood. I stumbled backward, my hands scrabbling for something, anything, to defend myself. But then something strange happened. They didn't attack. They didn't even move toward me. They just stood there, surrounding me in a perfect circle. Their heads tilted in unison, like they were studying me. The faceless man stepped forward, his smooth face inches from mine. He raised a hand, long, thin fingers that looked like they were made of porcelain, and pressed it against my chest. A burning sensation seared through me, and I collapsed to my knees, gasping for air. "Join us!" The voice echoed, louder now, filling the room. "It's better this way." I wanted to scream, to run, to do something, but my body wouldn't listen. My vision blurred, and for a moment, I thought it was over, that they were going to take me. But then a loud, piercing sound cut through the air. A shriek so high-pitched it felt like it was splitting my skull. The faceless man recoiled, his head snapping toward the door. The others followed, their movements suddenly erratic, almost panicked. Through the haze of my pain, I saw someone standing in the doorway. A woman, her face hidden beneath a hood. She held something in her hand, a small device emitting that awful sound. "Get up," she shouted, her voice sharp and commanding. "If you want to live, get up." I didn't need to be told twice. Summoning every ounce of strength I had left, I stumbled to my feet and followed her out the door, the faceless figures retreating as the sound grew louder. I didn't know who she was, or why she'd come for me, but one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The woman dragged me through the hallway, her grip iron-tight on my wrist as we ran. Behind us, the faceless figures hesitated just beyond the shattered window. They didn't follow immediately, but I could feel them watching, their presence like a weight pressing down on me. We hit the stairwell, and she practically shoved me down the steps. "Move!" she barked. "We don't have much time. They'll recover soon." My legs felt like jelly, but adrenaline pushed me forward. "Who the hell are you? What is going on?" I gasped between breaths. She didn't answer right away, focused entirely on getting us out. When we finally burst through the ground floor exit into the freezing night air, she spun around and held the device up toward the building. It let out another high-pitched shriek, and for a moment, I thought I saw the faceless man appear in the broken window above, his head tilting unnaturally as he stared down at us. Then he was gone. The woman shoved the device into her coat pocket and turned to me. "Get in the car," she said, jerking her head toward a beat-up SUV parked a few feet away. I hesitated. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what the hell is happening. Who are you? What are they?" She let out a frustrated growl and grabbed my arm, yanking me toward the vehicle. "You want answers? Fine. But if you stand here asking questions, you'll end up like the others. Marked. Now get in." The tone in her voice left no room for argument. I climbed into the passenger seat, slamming the door behind me. She jumped into the driver's seat, started the car, and peeled out of the lot like a bat out of hell. For a while, neither of us spoke. My pulse was still racing, my mind spinning with everything that had happened. It wasn't until we hit the highway, the city lights fading behind us, that she finally broke the silence. "They're called the Hollow Ones," she said, her eyes fixed on the road. "At least that's what I call them. No one really knows what they are, spirits, aliens, something worse. What we do know is that they feed on people like you." I swallowed hard. "People like me? What does that mean?" "Marked," she said simply. "Once they've marked you, they'll hunt you. Slowly, methodically, until there's nothing left of you." I touched the back of my neck where the faint handprint still burned against my skin. "Why me? I didn't do anything. I just worked at a gas station." She shook her head. "It doesn't matter. The how or why isn't important. What matters is that you've seen them. Once you see them, they know you exist. And once they know you exist, they don't stop until you're theirs." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "So what? They're going to keep coming after me? Forever?" "Not if I can help it," she said, glancing at me briefly. "That's why I'm here, to help people like you." I frowned, trying to process everything. "How do you know so much about them?" Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she sighed. "Because I was marked, too. Years ago, they took everything from me. My family, my home, my life. I've spent every moment since trying to stop them." I stared at her, stunned. "You survived." She nodded grimly. "Barely. But surviving isn't living. Not when you're constantly running, constantly looking over your shoulder." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. Was that my future? A life of fear and isolation, always one step ahead of the Hollow Ones? "Why are you helping me?" I asked quietly. She shrugged, her expression hard. "Because someone helped me once. And because I can't let them win." The conversation lapsed into silence again, the only sound the hum of the tires on the asphalt. I stared out the window, watching as the dark countryside rolled by. Every shadow, every flicker of movement in the trees made my heart jump. After about an hour, she pulled off the highway onto a dirt road that wound deep into the woods. I shifted uneasily in my seat. "Where are we going?" "To a safe house," she said. "Somewhere they can't find us." I wasn't sure I believed her. If these Hollow Ones were as relentless as she said, could we really hide from them? But I didn't have a better plan, so I kept my mouth shut. The road ended at a small cabin, half hidden by the trees. She parked the SUV and gestured for me to follow. Inside, the cabin was sparse but functional. An old couch, a wood-burning stove, a table cluttered with maps and strange devices. It smelled faintly of smoke and pine. She locked the door behind us and motioned for me to sit at the table. "We don't have much time," she said, pulling out the device she'd used earlier. "They'll track us eventually, but this should buy us a few hours." I watched as she adjusted the dials on the device. The shrill sound it emitted now a low hum. "What is that thing?" "A disruptor," she said. "It interferes with their whatever they use to track people. Think of it like jamming a signal." I leaned back in my chair, running a hand through my hair. "So what now?" "Now," she said, meeting my gaze. "We figure out how to break the mark before they find us again." Her words filled me with equal parts hope and dread. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had a chance. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Because somewhere out there, in the shadows, they were waiting, watching, and they weren't going to stop until they had me. The woman introduced herself as Rachel as we sat in the dim light of the cabin. Her voice was steady, but her eyes darted toward the windows every few seconds, scanning for movement. She seemed like someone who'd lived in fear for so long, it had become second nature. She spread a map across the table, covered in marks and notes written in sharp, jagged handwriting. Circles were drawn around certain locations, gas stations, highways, small towns, each one labeled with a name or date. I noticed one of the circles was drawn around the gas station where I'd worked. "You're not the first person to come through this area and get marked," Rachel said, pointing to the map. And you won't be the last. What happens to the others? I asked hesitantly, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. Rachel's jaw tightened. Most don't make it. The hollow ones either take them or they lose their minds before it comes to that. The ones who survive long enough to find me. Well, let's just say it's a short list. I swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling on me like a lead blanket. But you said there's a way to break the mark, right? There's a way, Rachel confirmed, her expression grim. But it's dangerous, and it doesn't always work. I leaned forward, desperation clawing at my insides. I'll do whatever it takes. I can't live like this, always looking over my shoulder. What do I need to do? Rachel hesitated, like she was trying to decide how much to tell me. Finally, she sighed and pulled out a small, weathered notebook from her jacket. The pages were filled with sketches, symbols, and hastily scrawled notes. She flipped to a page near the middle and laid it flat on the table. The page showed a crude drawing of what looked like a circle, surrounded by intricate symbols and lines. In the center was the outline of a faceless figure, its blank head staring out from the paper like it could see me. This, Rachel said, tapping the page, is a severance ritual. It's the only way I've found to break the mark. I stared at the drawing, my heart sinking. A ritual? You're kidding, right? She shook her head. Do I look like I'm kidding? The hollow ones don't play by our rules. If you want to stop them, you have to fight fire with fire. I sat back, running a hand through my hair. What does it involve? Rachel flipped the page, revealing a list of items written in her jagged handwriting. First, we need to create the circle. That means gathering these materials: salt, candles, specific herbs, and something that belongs to you. Something personal. That doesn't sound too bad, I said cautiously. That's the easy part, Rachel replied, her eyes narrowing. The hard part is the offering. I stiffened. Offering? She nodded. The hollow ones don't just mark you for fun. They want something from you, your energy, your essence, whatever you want to call it. To break the mark, you have to give them something in return. What kind of something? I asked, dread creeping into my voice. Rachel's gaze was piercing. A memory, something important, something that makes you who you are. It has to be significant, or the ritual won't work. I stared at her, my mind racing. A memory? How do you even decide something like that? What could I possibly give up that wouldn't leave me feeling hollow myself? Before I could respond, a loud thump echoed from outside the cabin. Rachel froze, her hand darting to the knife on her belt. Her eyes met mine, and I saw the fear in them. "They've found us," she whispered. Another thump, louder this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching through the snow. My heart pounded in my chest as I scrambled to my feet, my hands shaking. Rachel grabbed the disruptor and cranked the dial, the high-pitched whine filling the air again. "This won't hold them for long," she said, her voice low and urgent. "We have to move. Now." She pushed open a trapdoor in the floor, revealing a narrow tunnel that disappeared into darkness. "Go," she hissed, motioning for me to climb down. I hesitated, glancing at the windows. Shadows moved just beyond the glass, flickering and shifting in the moonlight. The hollow ones were here, and they weren't waiting anymore. "Go," Rachel snapped, and I finally obeyed, lowering myself into the tunnel. It smelled damp and earthy, the air thick with the scent of decay. Rachel followed, pulling the trapdoor shut behind her just as the cabin's front door burst open. We crawled through the tunnel in silence, the only sound the faint scraping of our hands and knees against the dirt. I didn't dare look back, even when I heard the muffled sound of something, or someone, moving above us. The tunnel opened into a small cave, dimly lit by a single lantern. Rachel stood and brushed herself off, her expression grim. "We'll finish the ritual here. What about them?" I asked, my voice trembling. "They're right above us." Rachel set the lantern on the ground and pulled the notebook from her jacket. "They can't get in here. Not yet, but we're running out of time. If we don't do this now, you'll never get another chance." She handed me a piece of chalk and pointed to the ground. Draw the circle exactly like it is in the book. I'll get the rest ready. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the chalk, but I started drawing. Every line, every symbol had to be perfect. I could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of what we were about to do bearing down on me. As I finished the last symbol, Rachel knelt in the center of the circle and placed a small metal box in front of me. "Put something inside," she said. "Something that matters. Something you're willing to lose." I hesitated, my mind racing. What could I give up? What should I give up? Then I thought of my younger brother, Mark. A photo of us was in my wallet, one I'd carried since the day he died in that car accident. It was all I had left of him, but I knew what I had to do. With shaking hands, I pulled out the photo and placed it in the box. "This," I whispered, my voice breaking, "this is my offering." Rachel closed the box and placed it in the center of the circle. "Let's hope it's enough," she said, lighting the candles one by one. The air grew heavy, the shadows in the cave deepening as the ritual began. And then, just as the final candle flickered to life, the ground beneath us began to shake. The hollow ones were coming, and I wasn't sure if the ritual would stop them or bring something even worse. The ground trembled beneath us, the cave walls vibrating with an eerie hum that seemed to grow louder with each passing second. The air felt heavier now, pressing down on my chest like a weight. The candles flickered wildly, their flames bending as though a storm was brewing inside the cave. Rachel's voice cut through the chaos, low and commanding, as she began chanting in a language I didn't recognize. The symbols in the circle started to glow faintly, the chalk lines shimmering with an unnatural light. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I kept my focus on the center of the circle, where the metal box sat like an anchor in the chaos. "What happens if this doesn't work?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Rachel didn't stop chanting, but her eyes flicked toward me. Her expression said it all. "If this doesn't work, we're dead." A loud crack echoed through the cave as the walls split in places, small chunks of stone raining down around us. The hollow ones were close now. I could feel them pressing against the edges of the circle, their presence like a cold wind seeping into my bones. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting and shifting, as if mocking us. And then I saw him. The faceless man stepped out of the darkness, his movements impossibly smooth and deliberate. He didn't cross into the circle, but he stopped just beyond it, tilting his head as though studying us. Behind him, dozens of the hollow ones gathered, their featureless faces turned toward me. It was like looking into an endless abyss. "You can't stop us," a voice whispered, but it wasn't coming from Rachel or me. It was coming from them, a chorus of voices, layered and hollow, echoing in unison. "You belong to us." Rachel's chanting grew louder, her voice rising above the noise. The symbols on the ground flared brighter, and the metal box began to shake. I could feel the energy building, a tension in the air so thick it was almost suffocating. "Don't look at them," Rachel shouted, breaking her chant for just a moment. "Focus on the circle. They're trying to break you." I tore my gaze away from the faceless figures and stared at the glowing symbols, forcing myself to block out the whispers and the shifting shadows. My hands trembled, and sweat dripped down my face as the pressure in the room intensified. Then it happened. The metal box burst open, a blinding light erupting from inside. The photo of my brother disintegrated in an instant, the ashes swirling upward like smoke. The glow from the symbols spread outward, forming a barrier that pushed the hollow ones back. They recoiled, their bodies jerking unnaturally as the light engulfed the cave. The faceless man didn't move. He stood his ground, his head tilting slightly as if to say, "This isn't over." Rachel's voice reached a crescendo, her words almost impossible to make out as the light grew brighter and brighter, filling every corner of the cave. The hollow ones screamed, not in anger, but in pain. Their collective cry was a sound I'll never forget, like 1,000 voices being ripped apart at once. And then, silence. When the light faded, the cave was empty. The hollow ones were gone, and the oppressive weight in the air had lifted. The circle was still glowing faintly, but the symbols were beginning to fade, the chalk lines smudging as if they had served their purpose. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. My body felt like it had been wrung out, every muscle aching. Rachel slumped against